I want to welcome everyone to Collector's Showcase, a series dedicated to discovering the collector behind the collection. We've all heard stories about trophy collections, the rarest autographs, and even full master sets. But who is behind them? This series will reveal that and much more. The guests featured here are among the most influential collectors, personalities, and icons in the Pokemon hobby. Join me. We'll find out who they are, where they came from, and what they're doing now. A series created by the hobby, for the hobby. This is Collector's Showcase. Welcome everybody to the season finale of Collector's Showcase. So excited for everyone to be here and very excited to actually get to this point. We've had a ton of great guests, great people on this, obviously series that I've put together, and it's all been, kind of building up to this finale. And the two guests today are going to be some of my absolute favorite people in the hobby. I respect these guys probably, on the Mount Rushmore of people of respect in this hobby. I think most of you would agree that they are definitely both on there. So to not waste any time, I want to start with introducing our very first guest. He has been a part of a lot of major companies like Ludkin's, CGC, definitely one of the biggest, let's call them big brains in the hobby, from my opinion. Probably one of the most well-spoken individuals that speaks on Pokemon and the general collectible market. I want to first off introduce Mr. Charlie Hurlocker. How are you, man?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I am doing wonderful. First off, thank you so much for doing this. I've watched probably every single interview you've ever done on YouTube at this point, and I'm just really excited to be able to sit down with you for the time that we've got, and pick your brain a little bit, and really just kind of understand, not necessarily who Charlie is, but kind of how you engage in the hobby, and really just what your thoughts are, on a various amount of subjects. So before we get started, I was hoping you could maybe give us kind of a quick 90-second, 2-minute spiel on who you are, what you do in the hobby, and kind of how you engage. Just for anybody watching back, and I know I've said this time and time again, I'm sure every single person in here knows who you are, but for anybody watching back, it's always very helpful.
Sure. My name's Charlie Hurlocker. I collect Pokemon cards. I've been collecting, English high end, and later expanded that for over a decade now. And I have, since my time in the hobby started, it's become sort of my career. And I've been a consultant for some different projects, and I've been built some of my own companies in the space, and all the while, buying and selling cards, and all of it with the pursuit of keeping as many cool cards as I can for myself. So,
which is a challenge, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a lifelong fight of being responsible versus having a good time. So it's that's kind of the background of who I am and how I'm in the hobby. So.
Awesome, man. Yeah, you've definitely had one of the most interesting kind of journeys throughout collectibles. I was really trying to rack my brain the last couple of days to think of anyone else, I think, who's had your unique lane that you've chosen. You kind of started as a collector, 6 years old, you're grinding in the playground, and it's pretty much been nonstop ever since. So, to see where you've been able to get today, and, what you've been able to build is pretty awesome, to see from the outside. And I'm sure that, you've had a few moments where you think like, wow, this is pretty amazing. And I can tell you that mindset is definitely shared for people who see you from the outside. So so excited to have you on, and really excited to talk about some of the things that we've planned on talking about. So before we do that, I want to introduce our next guest as well. He has built arguably one of the biggest volume selling businesses that an individual can in this hobby. To date, he has over 400,000 items sold in his eBay store. The giveaway king, in my opinion. It seems like every other day, if not every day, I see this man opening packs. And if anybody wants to do the math on how much cardboard has touched this man's hands, you will need a very large calculator. So the next person I want to introduce is going to be Mr. Rusty from TCA Gaming. How's it going, Rusty?
Hey, y'all.
And I do want to let everyone know, Rusty is powering through here, no pun intended. He's having solar panels installed, and we're running on generator power. So if anybody has sacrificed more to be on this for you guys, it's definitely going to be Rusty. So I appreciate you doing that, man, and powering through.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely. Well, similar to what I asked Charlie. Again, I think most people are familiar with your name and probably watched you on multiple streams. I know you recently have hit. You're almost at 80,000 subs. I was in the stream last night. I think you hit the 70,900 last night. So, but for anyone who happens to maybe only know you from afar and hasn't really adjusted much of what you do in the hobby, maybe you could give maybe an overview of again who you are, how you engage, kind of what you've done so far.
Yeah, so my name's Rusty. I go by TCA Gaming. I have a lot of fun in this hobby, just working with Pokemon cards. I do everything from grading cards. I used to take them for other people, but I'm not doing that anymore. That's out of it. I do mostly selling on eBay. I do a lot of YouTube videos now, try to make some different types of content. But for the most part, I'm just trying to further my collection along, kind of like Charlie. YouTube, eBay, all these things are a way to engage in Pokemon and to make a living while also enjoying the hobby and being able to add to the collection.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing as well, before I even started this channel or anything, I kind of started at a little bit of a similar route. You start collecting and then really to find some of the, almost to kind of, tip that out to Charlie, you start looking for some of these rare items. It's very, very difficult to do that without engaging and building relationships and speaking to people. And one of the things that really motivated me to even make this channel and really put this series together is throughout those relationships, meeting so many just amazing collectors, amazing people who maybe weren't, huge content creators or, putting out a ton of YouTube content or anything like that. I would have conversations with different people and say, well, this person has this and they're amazing and they post a lot of cool stuff. And I heard time and time again, well, who is that? I don't know who that is. So, what I'm hoping that, this series does in its entirety is be able to shed light on people that may not have as big of a presence as, maybe yourself or just, say a Leonhard or a PokeRev or anyone like that. And really just kind of understand, where you guys came from, what you're doing, because I really do think that, the people we've been able to have on this have really changed the game, and are probably one of the, or most of the respected people, that we've seen in the hobbies. So again, like I told Charlie, I so appreciate you coming on, Rusty, especially with the power challenges. Congrats on the solar panels. By the way, I saw Dan in the chat. He said, okay, they're finally here. So if you've been working up to that, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's taken a while. I'm just hoping everything goes smoothly, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, chat, you've got Rusty. Just know there's a timer going, so enjoy him while you can. But what I want to do, guys, is as we kind of talked about pre-stream, I've got a few different questions for each one of you. I've got a couple of questions for both of you guys to answer as well. And then what we'll do toward the end, once those are done, is actually go through some chat questions. So I want to start with a question for both of you guys, because I know that you two have known each other for a number of years now. So I'm curious, how did you guys meet? What was that first interaction? What was it like? Did you guys know each other prior to meeting, or was it just kind of a happenstance that you guys met? I don't know if I've ever heard that, actually.
PokeGym.net.
There you go, PokeGym.
Yeah. Met on PokeGym. Obviously you interact kind of like passively with people through the forums. The first major purchase that I remember making is the FPO set. So Rusty had just gotten somebody from Wizards of the Coast. You could tell that part of the story better than me, to like sell them a collection or whatever. And it had these, and I was just like, had never seen anything like them. It was one of those things where I was like, my intuition was like, these are really cool. Like I have to, this is definitely like, at the time I had already kind of like made my list of like, okay, what are the high end English cards? Like, what do I have to have? And obviously these weren't discovered yet, so they weren't on there. But I was like, all right, this has to go on the list. So it's like one of the first big things I added to the list. And and like also like Rusty was asking for like $2,750 a set, which at the time was like big money. Like that was like the highest of the high end. And I was like, man, like this is like outside of sort of like my budget. What can I do? So I like told him, so I just messaged him and I was like, hey, like I don't know how to do this, but I have to have these. What can we do? And he like worked with me on a payment plan and stuff. And I think that was like my first kind of like meaningful interaction. I don't know, Rusty, you remember anything earlier?
I bought the EX series hollows off of you too, right? Those ones you'd handpicked for like
So
1,500 bucks.
I bought an FPO set and then I got robbed. Like somebody stole that from me, and then I
Right.
had to buy another FPO set. And part of our deal for the second FPO set was a complete master set of all EXs that had been printed. That, in hindsight, I don't. Maybe my condition assessments weren't as good as they would be now, but I thought that they were all mint. And he got them, and he was happy with them, and we like put that towards the set. Is basically how that went.
So
Yeah, I think
Charlie,
that
how
was like-
long? or go
I
ahead,
think that was
Rusty.
like $1,500 total, like
Yeah,
valuation
something.
trade.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
something.
you think about that now, it just seems kind of crazy. And almost all those cards were mint. I think there was like one Flygon EX. I remember that had a small crease on it, but a lot of those graded 10s, like he did really good on them, especially back then. I mean, even back then, it was still hard to find people who could assess condition well. And so, I mean, he was able to put that together.
I'm glad it worked out. Yeah, FPO set's a little more than 2752 now. So
Yeah.
Yeah, just a tad bit. So when was this exactly? I mean, was this 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I mean, I feel like it probably a little bit longer.
I mean, so 2011, is that when you found the FPOs?
I think it was 2013 because I just moved
2013.
into my apartment. So it was probably within 6 months of whenever that first video posted of mine on YouTube.
Yeah. So because I know, Charlie, you said that these hadn't really been discovered yet. So Rusty, did you know, I guess, to look for that FPO set, or was it just someone you were talking to, the WotC contact that you had, and they said, "Hey, I've got these things," and you said, "I don't know what those are, but white text in the front of a card, and it's actually legit. What is this? I have to have it." How did you go about kind of finding out about those cards?
I got lucky.
Yeah.
I was looking on eBay. There was 5 cards fanned out on carpet, and I saw 2 Charizards in there. I think there was like an Alakazam, a Blastoise, and maybe like an Ampharos. And he was asking $59.99. I'm like, this is worth the risk. And I hit buy now. As soon as I bought it, I looked at the other stuff that he was selling. He was selling Dungeons and Dragons, and he was selling Magic. And usually, if you have Pokemon Magic and Dungeons and Dragons, that's
WotC.
an early type WotC employee. And I messaged him to see if he had other stuff. And he was like, "Yeah, I've got a stack of them." And then he had the packs that he physically pulled off the conveyor belt that were heading towards the shredder. He ended up having some other really cool stuff like the mock-up legendary, uncut theme deck test prints, and some other stuff like
how
that.
cool.
It was really cool.
Yeah, that's amazing to be able to kind of find the golden gem in that. You go in to buy one thing, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, I've got this other stuff. I think we've all kind of run into that
Oh,
before.
he had a lot of stuff, yeah.
Well, and
Yeah,
sort of the process back then was really different. So, now everybody knows about Pokemon and everybody knows that there's value associated with Pokemon. So you won't have the same experience today that you would have back then. Back then, though, like there really wasn't a whole lot of information, even communities online. Like that's when the earliest social media communities are starting to form, and they're very small. And the forums online are really small. Like, I mean, PokeGym is really big in terms of like Pokemon's history, like of online community like in marketplaces and stuff. But I mean, there couldn't have been more than a couple hundred active users. Like, it really wasn't that big. Just barely big enough to kind of like have a market and kind of have like a community. Like, we were right at the cusp of that. And so yeah, like, I mean, you would find like people like that would list something online, and really you could have anything. Like, I remember like I would buy collections or whatever, and sign cards like back then, which are like really hot right now, were like worthless. like literally like nobody, there was no defined market for them, and so people would throw those in for free. Like, there were a lot of times where I would get world competitor collections, and they would throw in a binder with like maybe 20, 30, 40 signatures, and they would just include those, or maybe they'd want like $40 for it or something because they just weren't worth anything. And so, yeah, you had a lot of situations like that where it's like, yeah, you have like those back then, sort of the logic of like, okay, what do you look for? Like, what does it mean? Because there's you get like tons of like the number of times I've heard somebody say like it's a former WotC employee. Like, that has almost been like it's kind of become one of those things where it's like, yeah, I caught the biggest fish you've ever seen. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, the degree to which it's like factual. Sometimes they miss, but back then it was sort of like a different experience. It was really unique.
Right. Well, that's one of the things too, especially when you mentioned, Worlds cards, because you and I have both spoken about a few different times in some very funny conversations in the past, especially Worlds competitors. And that was one thing I had actually on our last stream last Friday, John Brooks Blastoise kid, who I think both of you guys are familiar with, an original competitor back in the old Super Trader Showdown stuff. And and has just so many different, especially sign cards, Charlie, kind of how you mentioned how they throw in the binder for $40 and whatever it is. I think he held up, a couple. I think he had something like 10 or 15 Arita signatures, and he's like, "Who's this? Is this worth something?" So from my experience, obviously, I haven't been in near as long as you guys have, but when it comes to original competitors, those are some of the ones that I'll see that will have things that they've just kind of stored away because, obviously being a part of those championships, especially the early ones, they would just give stuff out. People were signing pretty regularly. Autos weren't a huge deal, so they just shoved them in a binder, and you just kind of had them available. So, but yeah, I completely agree. I think with autos, especially, just absolutely mooning at the moment. I think we're going to see a little bit of a shift in that. People are going to be holding those cards a little bit more tighter, and I think the $40 binders are probably out of reach at this point for most, or at least that price point, for sure. Well, that's awesome. So a couple of questions for you guys individually. And so Charlie, Rusty, a little bit related to kind of world championships and things like that. So one of the things that, I've seen a lot this year is you've actually purchased a good amount of trophies this year. I know you've got, you purchased the 99 Tropical Win. I think that was from Pokey Chloe. Our good friend Dan Catch'em Collectibles, who's in the chat right now, bought his number 2, number 4 full art Pikas. So I'm curious, with about 5 or 6 different trophy buys this year, I don't know if I've seen you pick up trophies, in the past, but this year it seems like you've really started buying into them. So I'm curious, why now? Why have you decided to kind of start making those moves, making those buys this year specifically?
It's more just kind of like chance. I mean, a lot of these opportunities, they never really presented themselves to me in the past when I just dealt with products. But I think as I moved more into buying some of these PSA 10 Charizards and higher end, regular English type cards, it opened up the door for some of these other trophies. And when they presented themselves to me, if I looked at it, it seemed like a good opportunity. I would just kind of plan for that. And so really, I didn't go out searching for any of these cards individually or specifically, but they did end up, in my hands through, some kind of deal one way or the other. I think the only 2 trophies I've really ever kind of went for, but I haven't went for them hard, are the Lucky Stadium and the Bilingual Executor, those TMB ones, because they have the English and the Japanese language on them. I thought that was really cool. But the other ones, again, they just kind of fell into my lap, and the deal worked out.
Yeah, I did see the Bilingual Executor. Technically, you have a label for that. I think you posted a while back.
I had sent that one back.
yeah, that was. I saw that post the other day. You were like, "Come on, guys, what is this?" So yeah, that's really interesting. So that's something that you haven't really. Was it maybe a focus, or did it enter your mind even last year to think about looking into it? Maybe were you? I'm sure you're at least familiar with some, recognition, I guess, when it comes to knowing what they were. But when you did start looking at buying, were people just approaching you with these? Were there certain ones that you said, "Hey, if this does come my way, I'm going to look into purchasing," or was it just sort of up in the air? "Hey, I have an opportunity to buy this. Now I'll look into it and make an offer."
Most of it was up in the air. In fact, probably the first time I ever saw a full art Pika was at the Hartford Regionals when Charlie had his on display. And I thought, man, those look really nice. Like, to me, that artwork appealed so much more to me than some of these older artworks that I typically see on the trophy type cards. And I'm not highly knowledgeable when it comes to this area at all. I'm gaining more knowledge as I spend money, but usually that's what it takes. If money's involved, then you're going to acquire that knowledge naturally, because money is definitely in play there. Like the one from Pokey Chloe, I mean, that just happened to be in the deal. That was actually a deal that was kind of incorporated with Charlie as well. I don't want to reveal everything. I don't know how he cares about it, but that ended up kind of being like a triangle right here. He led me to that, so he might have been the one who led me to the full art Pikas as well. And then the TNB, who knows? He might have been the guy telling me about Radar, having that thing over there. So my short answer might be it's probably because of Charlie. He's probably
He's pulling the strings in the background. He's like, "I'll get Rusty some trophies."
I'm out here getting Rusty to spend his money on Pokemon cards. That's definitely my fault, right?
Yeah, he wouldn't be spending anything without you pulling his strings, I'm sure, right?
Oh, yeah. He started before me, so he started before. Yeah, I don't know if I would have gotten into trophy cards if it weren't for the fact that, people like Rusty were there early on, like, highlighting all these really cool cards. And trophy cards are not so much like, I don't know, there used to be a lot of conversation around like whether or not like trophy cards and like rare cards are like a separate distinction or whatever. But I think that like once you just start collecting, like you kind of decide what criteria makes you happy and like what's fun. And a lot of people, they like the idea of like having a card that has a chase. And there's one of the things you find too is that most of the chase in the hobby tends to be just like purely economic hurdles. And so like if you're trying to go beyond that and you get to the point where it's like, okay, well, like I could buy, I don't feel the need to have like a base set binder collection, right? Because I know at any point I've always been able to just go and just buy these, and like the only thing standing between me and them is just spending the money. But for me, I think it's fun to chase cards. So like I'm really interested. It took me 11 years to get an English versus set, a set that I was tipped off to because of Rusty. But when I finally got that, that's like a crazy experience, because it's like you spent so long looking for it, and it's not a set. Like there were times when I had the money, but there were no sets, and then there were times when there were sets, but I didn't have the money. And it just you have to have them line up in the right way. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree with that take, because that's one thing, even from my own personal experience. Obviously you can spend as much money as you'd like, right? If there's stuff that's available, it's going to be expensive, depending on what you're looking at. But definitely the chase and kind of the story of acquisition has always really stood out to me. That's why I really enjoy like and we've talked about this, like the 04 Tropical Winds, like those competitor sets and those top stamps and things like that, especially the staffs. Those are always ones that I really, really enjoy, and like the idea of, these vintage tournaments, not a lot of people involved, very few given out. We don't even really know the count. And then not even being able to find them. I think that's one thing that really intrigued me in the beginning, is I would just look up tons and tons of videos. DJ Gigabyte, shout out him. If anybody doesn't follow him or subscribe to him on YouTube, please do. I mean, he's been putting out videos, probably similar time frame to Rusty as well. But a lot of really, really good knowledge, education. And he was one of the first videos, him and Jake Pokenomics, talking about World Stamp promos and talking about what they are and kind of the history behind them. And I think ever since I saw that, I was kind of hooked in the chase of trying to find them and being able to hunt down these collectors in these, page 9 of a thread and trying to, make something happen has always been a little bit more exciting. I think I've heard you say, Charlie, in the past that you're more of a promo guy versus a set guy. And I align with that completely. I think it's something that packs are great. I love being able to pull stuff, open products. But the most exciting thing for me is being able to find something with kind of historical value that, like JR stamp rallies are a big one that stand out to me. Having to go and physically do something back in the day to actually acquire cards. I just love the idea of the story behind where that card's traveled, how it got there and things like that. So, yeah, that's it sounds like both of you guys are spending each other's money. So that's good that it's mutual doing that. So, Charlie, for one thing that I wanted to ask you, and this is obviously kind of the first question. That's a fairly easy one. I'm sure you've been asked before, but for anybody watching who doesn't know, Charlie is a Pawn Star celebrity. He was. I always had to give a title to it. So I'm curious how were you approached with Pawn Stars? Did you approach them? How did you get to the point where you were kind of being involved with those guys? I know you've got kind of a little bit more of a business relationship with them currently, but I'm curious how'd you initially get on the show? Did they reach out to you? Was it something that CGC was probably involved more with? What does that look like?
So, when Gary went on, that was their first Pokemon clip, and it ended up being the most viewed Pawn Stars clip online.
Oh, wow.
Of all time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, that they're looking back when they're at the point now where they're like putting together seasons, and they're very focused on sort of like the longevity of their franchise. And a lot of that has to do with like, they have to like play the game. They have to, be smart about like, okay, what clips are getting attention? Like, because now it's kind of like, they don't just value it off of like cable TV views, right? They value it off of these like additional views that they get through publications and articles and short clips and stuff like that. And so, being the most viewed clip made it obvious that, they wanted to feature another Pokemon item. They see that as a way of like strategically bridging and, because they do have like primarily like an older audience, and which I think has to do with both the cable and just the subject matter. Pawn Stars Pawn Stars has like a lot of like their biggest displays are like jewelries, coin. Like, I don't know if you've been like to their store, but it's a lot of like boomer collectibles, right? Yeah. It's a lot of like old stuff. Yeah. So, they wanted to do like Pokemon, and I think the same season has like a Pokemon clip, a Yu-Gi-Oh clip, a Magic clip. There's a video games clip. Like they're very strategic, sort of like what they put in. And so they they had reached out to a mutual contact and said, you know, like, this is kind of like what we want. Like, this is the vein of like what we're going for. And they were like, hey, these are the cards that I think I could get that like on your show that like kind of do that, like fit in there. And they ended up picking the card before me. And so in the process of seeking that out, you know, you have like a lot of people know, like, you've ever been to like an event where they're like, hey, you have to sign this form that's like, it says you can be photographed and we can use those photos and video and whatever. That exists for people, but that also exists for stuff. So like they can't just show the card and monetize it and make money off of it without like a waiver, essentially. And I was like, hey, look, here's the deal. I'll sign the waiver either way. But is there any way I could be on the show? Like, that'd be pretty cool, right? And
all you can do is ask, so why not?
Yeah, right. And they were like, well, we have like this agreement, like with this is how we do our professionals. Like, this is how we like. I was like, that's fine. I'll play the random dumb guy. Like, I don't have a problem with that. And they're like, well, that's not our usual process, because it is. So the thing about Pawn Stars is the offers are real. So like when that price is determined ahead of time, like, it's a real offer. I can choose cash or I can choose the card. Like I can, they will legitimately buy it, and it's not, they don't just like make random purchases. Like they earnestly price it the way that they would price it if they believe that they can make money. So it's not, my experience kind of breaks the grain a little bit, but it is almost all of the people that appear on the show wrote in, said, hey, I've got this item for sale. Would you be interested? And reached a price and like had that agreement ahead of time. And so mine's a little bit exceptional in that sense. And so we went, and it was a legitimate interaction. It was not, it was staged in that, like, I am not actually a random customer that walked in off the street, but at the same time, like, it is secondary that it was me. Like, they didn't pick me, like they picked the card, and then I just happened to have, like, that happened to be my card. And so, that's kind of like the interesting kind of way that I got there.
Well, I will say one of the more fun things is seeing. I think his name is Matt, if I'm not mistaken, with CGC.
Matt Quinn's vice president of trading.
Yeah, Matt Quinn's. Yeah. So one of the things that I found interesting is seeing, and I know obviously it's, like you said, you're kind of the random dumb guy. Seeing people explain to you what your card is was obviously knowing you and knowing the knowledge that you have. That was always entertaining. You're like, yep, I'm aware. That's cool. So it was pretty funny to see that, the kind of fiction side of the show a little bit. And I'm curious, just kind of a small piggyback off of that. And this doesn't necessarily have to be related to, the Pawn Stars shop or anything like that. But do you have, I guess, what would be the most unique, like, collectible you've been able to actually see? I know you went to Heritage and kind of saw some cool stuff with Gem Men, and Rusty obviously as well. But is there one collectible that comes to mind that you just thought was one of the coolest, like, mind-blowing things that you didn't expect to see?
Like non-Pokemon?
Yeah, let's say non-Pokemon, Pokemon, whatever your preference would be.
Well, in Pokemon, the only things I haven't seen so far are like things that I just don't know about. So, I might like that tends to be production samples or errors or stuff like that you just wouldn't have a reason to know about. I think I've seen or handled on the, because I got to go to like Scott Brad's house before the trophies were worth crazy amounts. So like I've seen and handled high-end Japanese trophies, and I own almost every high-end English item. So like in terms of like Pokemon, it's not a super exciting story, but for like outside of Pokemon, oh geez, I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, look, I live outside DC, so like, the Smithsonian museums are absolutely insane, and at any time they only have, this is like less than 1% of their items displayed, and you can go and you can just see like absolutely insane history. So I don't know. For me, there's not like a magic formula that makes me think like, hey, this item's like particularly cool. It tends to be like I'm kind of just like a passive observer, and I like kind of just enjoy these things in their context, and so like. I couldn't give you an answer as to like one item that like really jumps out at me, but I've really enjoyed being able to go and like see things in their context, or in art. Like art happens probably more. I'm a huge Dale Chihuly fan. And there's just some like really crazy like Dale Chihuly installations. Like that's something that I think of where I'm like, wow, this is really cool. That's kind of like the most perhaps like awe-inspiring that intersects with collectability, maybe.
Yeah,
I'm
like
doing my best.
historical
I'm doing
items.
my
No, no,
best.
no.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
it's fine. It kind of puts you on the spot a little bit. And I just know that you've held Thor's hammer. I thought that was cool. I was like, it's got to be it. No.
Oh yeah. I mean,
That was cool.
Heritage does have a lot of like really cool stuff, especially after their acquisition of it's gonna escape me, but they bought the largest auction house for movie props. So if you're really into cinema, like they have like some really crazy stuff there now. As part of like these like long-term like liquidations and stuff like that. So yeah, if you like movies, like Profiles in History, I think that's what it's called. Yeah, they bought Profiles in History, which is pretty crazy. So.
Well, you were able to lift the hammer, so I think that says a lot about you.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Well, Rusty, or actually both of you guys, this is a question. Obviously, kind of swinging back a little bit more to Pokemon. And I'm curious about this because I remember hearing a conversation with some people talking about how they thought Pokemon was attempting to sort of push Bidoof as kind of the new face of Pokemon. And someone was talking about how they had some shirts they were launching for like the anniversary and had like the outline of him. So I'm curious for both of you, do you guys ever see another face of Pokemon beyond Charizard and Pikachu ever happening, or do you think that those are just so much of a ingrained staple in the imagery of the hobby that they're always going to reign supreme?
I mean, it's happening, right? Bidoof, right? Like who's big is who Pokemon pushes. They're the ones who put the advertising dollars and decide which characters are popular, like sincerely. And so like they're putting their money behind Bidoof right now. And so I think that Bidoof is like a Pokemon that I don't think anybody would have individually chosen to be their favorite, but now it has a lot of publicity.
Right. What about you, Rusty?
Nah, Bidoof ain't gonna do anything. I don't like Bidoof.
I didn't understand the choice either.
That's just how I feel. Maybe the next generation will feel differently, but I don't see it. Like I don't see the appeal of the Bidoof. I mean, you've got Pikachu, you've got Charizard. I mean, you would think like with the movie, Mewtwo and Mew could have possibly made some kind of push, or even with like Generation 2, you've got Lugia, which is highly popular, but it's still nowhere near that same popularity as what a Pikachu and a Charizard. Really, probably, maybe even just Pikachu. Charizard's kind of like the card thing that you want to go for, but Pikachu is kind of like that icon that I think everybody recognizes with Pokemon. So yeah, if Pokemon pushes it hard enough, it's definitely going to gain traction and popularity. But it would take a massive push, and I don't know why they would want to switch to Bidoof when they already have a mascot that's already working so well. So to me, it doesn't make that much sense.
Well, I don't think Pokemon like perceives of its world of creatures as like a hierarchy with an individual leader, right? So like when I say that they're pushing Bidoof, I'm saying that like they have the ability to control the degree to which we care about and look at and experience from a collectible perspective opportunities to prize and cherish these cards. Special Delivery Bidoof is not a card that would have any interest whatsoever, but it bears a real market value as a result of the way that it was released, and it was released because of Pokemon's intentional pushes. I don't think that if you're talking about like solely like a collector's secondary hierarchy, no, I don't think that changes because with time you just get even more like vintage added on to sort of like the higher end items. But if you're talking about like Pokemon's a world of characters and the degree to which the Pokemon company would seek to prioritize the importance of an individual character, that I do think shifts. I think that is, and that's what I would point to Bidoof. I don't think that they want Bidoof to be Charizard. In fact, I think that they don't want anything to be Charizard because their whole appeal is that there's a Pokemon for everyone and that you get to explore a world of creatures. So I think that like the idea of there being like an overtaken hierarchy is inherently contextual and kind of goes against the grain of like the way that the Pokemon company perceives of its own product.
It's a really good take on that because I didn't necessarily separate that in my mind. I was thinking who will dethrone, Pikachu, Charizard if they ever did, from a branding standpoint. But it makes sense that you take it from kind of the business perspective, which is they can push who they want. If they want merchandise out here, and you mentioned Special Delivery Bidoof, one of the very few, English promos that we have, which is, I think a testament to how much they wanted people to, to put that card and put that Pokemon in front of people. So, that being said, I will completely agree with Rusty. I don't think that any sort of push or anything. I think it would maybe spike popularity, maybe in the collecting community or just, merchandise sales, things like that. But as far as the overall brand, I think Pikachu, they've had a winning formula for so long, and I can't see them, replacing that or even that being the goal, with it. So, yeah, completely agree.
Do either one of y'all watch the main show anymore? Is it still Pikachu running around with like an Ash with a different voice, or does Bidoof run around with one of these characters? I'm just curious. I wasn't aware of the Bidoof push, but now it makes a little more sense, why they had the Bidoof, on the special delivery card.
I do not still watch any of it. I watched it as a kid, went into cards and the video game specifically, and that's really where my stuff was. I was never a huge watcher of the show. Obviously, I saw the movie, but I want to say that I've talked to people who have brought that up, where I guess he's done like big events and episodes and stuff. He's been a part of it, but I'm not sure if you watch the anime, Charlie, or you're caught up on any of that.
Don't watch the anime, don't play the video games. Pretty much just a card guy, but I'm familiar with sort of like the ways that their advertising pushes go, because part of being a card collector is keeping an eye on the Pokemon Center, and so the Pokemon Center is usually the place that I look for sort of like who they're pushing and like what they're really going for. And they've done like Ditto campaigns, and the Bidoof, they did like a whole month dedicated to Bidoof, and so that was like a really big deal. And then I think that you're onto something. I think you're right when you say that like they don't really push a lot of their unique promos and assets over to the English TCG. And so them doing that obviously indicates that it's a higher priority for them than a lot of stuff is. But I think Ditto would be like another example, because obviously they've integrated Ditto creatively into the TCG with the peelable cards, which I think is super cool. I love this.
Yeah. Well, I think it's pretty smart as well, even from being able to generate a lot of new ideas with card art, and then also being able to put product lines out, because Ditto being able to mirror every Pokemon, you're in essence creating something that can change the art of every Pokemon that you want. So you've almost doubled the amount of opportunities that you've got to be able to use that, because you're really in essence just putting a mirror there, that looks a little bit different. So really good take. So Rusty, onto a question for you specifically. So you've been doing this, I think, about 13 years, 9 years full time, but 13, I think, kind of buying and selling cards and things like that. Is there an end collection or maybe business goal that you're working toward? I mean, have you kind of set yourself up, here are the long-term goals, and when I achieve these, I'm good? Or is it just something that, you've created such a well-oiled machine with everything that you're doing, really you've got the ability to kind of have that financial freedom to say, okay, whenever the kind of the flame goes out, I can move on to something else, and I'll do that. But is there any type of end goal, I guess, from a collection or a business standpoint that you're working toward?
I mean, I have collection goals that I want to complete, but I don't really have an end goal. I'll be honest with you. I feel like if I get to, I completed everything, which would be basically impossible. My goals are kind of ridiculous, and it's always changing with every new set that comes out. But say I did complete everything, I got everything I wanted, I'd probably still want to buy and sell and create videos and do things. But what I try to do is, within the business, if something gets old to me or I don't like it, doesn't have that same feel to it anymore, like it feels like it's a chore, that's when I try to start phasing it out or changing it up. Like I try to make it a little bit different, tweak it, and then if that doesn't work, then I'll go ahead and quit it. Like I like taking in PSA submissions for a while, and then it started to become a chore, and then it was just like manual labor of responding to people, dealing with this, dealing with that, and it was great for business. I mean, you made money on the front end with the cards, and on the back end you got to advertise. Once they come back in, and sometimes people want to sell through you. But the thing is, like, I didn't enjoy it anymore, so I cut that part of the business out, and so now I focus more on like the consignment side. That's why I have like minimums with the consignment. I don't want to be dealing with the super low end where I'm just constantly grinding out really small items, even though that the margin might still be good. It's not something that I want to pursue. I enjoy seeing the higher end cards, the ones that are a little bit more scarce, seeing them go for prices, showing them on YouTube. All these little things. I think as you're building your career, working towards some kind of goal, you really need to be enjoying life too, because you could be missing out on the best part of your life, while you're young.
Yeah, and that is one thing that I've heard you say, and I completely relate to is the value of your time, right? And to kind of plug Dan Catch 'em All Collectibles again, he just recently launched his whole consignment service that he's starting to do, and one of the main points that he talked about was putting those minimums on there for the exact same reasons that you do, which is $10 cards, maybe they are, there is 40-50% margin in some of those, but just the sheer amount of time dedicated to having to ship those and take care of all of them. I think the way he described it is he didn't want to be a cheap vault service. I think he goes, I want to stick to a timeline. I want to be able to turn these out. So, and I think his minimums were something like 250, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I can definitely see that as it's interesting to hear from yourself as well, because I'm sure there's been plenty of revenue streams you've gone through, and it seems like consignments actually do really, really well for you. But I can only imagine if you just said, okay, guys, floodgates are open. I mean, you would probably hit a PSA backlog at that point when it came to consignments and never be able to do anything other than that. So, yeah, that's interesting without a goal at the end. It's kind of like I mentioned, it seems like it's more of a kind of a well-oiled machine. You've got a good thing going and you're having fun with it. And, especially with time management, it seems, from what you've spoken about in the past, you do prioritize time with the family and time outside of it. And I just love the grinds, man. I love the work ethic, and it's really, really inspiring, I think, for a lot of people to see that you don't necessarily have to be at a quote unquote rusty level, but if you've got that discipline and you have that kind of that hard cutoff, really, really balancing your work life but work hard at both. You can be successful with that and still enjoy it and not get burned out as quickly. So that's interesting. I'd never heard anyone really call or ask you if you had an end goal. So that was one of the big ones I wanted to ask. So Charlie, moving on to yourself. So this is one that's definitely more on the business side of things. So one of the things you mentioned is, and I've heard you talk about this before, and shout out, not Shivam. That was a great interview that you did with him. And I think he had a lot of really, really great questions. I watched the whole thing through a couple of times. And one of the topics that got brought up that I think was talked about very quickly that I wanted to kind of extrapolate a little bit more with you. You talked about traditional finance not being available to businesses like yourself and businesses kind of in this space and in this hobby, specifically when it came to TCG cards and being able to use those for leverage. So I'm curious on your side, what steps or maybe thought process change, et cetera, would have to occur, I guess, either on the financial institution side or just economically for you guys to be able to have those opportunities. And for the people who maybe don't know what I'm talking about, maybe if you could kind of touch on that too, because I know that you as a business owner, this is definitely one of the biggest probably profit opportunities that you guys have if you were able to use leverage a little bit more in the space.
Well, I think you need some pretty significant shifts in the industry. I think we're kind of going through one right now. I noticed that people's willingness to auction cards, especially with professional auction houses, is higher than it has been in the past. There's always been a lot of hesitancy. I think that when you have that low volume of sales and you have that like uncertainty, how many buyers are out there, how much are they willing to bid on a moment's notice, when you have been in a long period where even though values are increasing, you have low liquidity, you have long periods of time between sales. There's a very serious question about the depth of buyer pool and how well that's going to match up with kind of like what's for sale. People just avoid the risk that's inherent to auctions. As you increase the amount of money in the hobby, you increase the number of people participating, you increase the threshold at which each person is willing to buy. When you have all of these developments, which we have seen significantly in the last few years, some of that risk that comes with auctions kind of gets chipped away a little bit. And now, with an auction, yeah, they can go poorly. I've seen some situations, especially with I sent a bunch of stuff to Heritage or whatever, and it was like 50% sort of like what our conservative estimate had been, which is not good, right? Like that's like not a good result. At the same time, I think that we're kind of seeing that level out. Auctions are sort of like, it's not that they're the real market. I don't really like the way to put like that sometimes gets portrayed, but they are like the most accessible aspect of like transparent, what is this worth today? And those ultimate conservative valuations that kind of come exclusively out of the live auction scene, where it actually sold, exactly what it sold for, you have that public transparency. The fact that it was with a professional auction house means you have a 99% likelihood that it did sell and was paid for. You need those elements in order to even just collect data. So, and if you can't collect data, you can't have a formal financial system built on top of it. That's entirely dependent on likelihoods and data and stuff like that. And so I think that's kind of like the big, we're in just the next maturation stage, which is that we need to get to the point that sports is at, where you can auction things regularly and you don't have this constant fear. And that's a big growing pain, because I think that a lot of people are hesitant. I think that a lot of people, they prefer the system of list it high and wait for a long time. And when you get a price that, you are in love with, you take it. But that behavior as a market is immature. Like it may be your personal preference, and it may be like a comfort level thing, and nobody has to participate in the market a certain way to achieve these ends. But if we want to achieve these financial ends, we have to have these more liquid marketplaces with more transparency around prices and more comfort of like, okay, the sale is real. Like one of the things I was just like, PWCC posted a card, and they were like, this is the highest public sale or whatever. And immediately, like, I saw like a handful of people jump on it, and they were like, no, this private sale happened. Like, this guy did like a private sale, and like, that's not real. Like, that's like old thinking. Like, that means nothing to the market. It means nothing to these companies. It means nothing to, honestly, a lot of buyers, because you can't trust that information. You don't know that it's real. It can be manipulated. It is often not the full case. It may feel better. Like it feels good to say, I got this big mystery number. Oh, I don't want to talk about it. Like that type of stuff. But it's an immature way of doing business. Like, that's not real. Like, I mean, you don't see that really with real estate. You don't see that with cars. You don't see that with, like, there's so many different things where it's like this, if this was how the majority of business was done, the entire system would crumble. And so that process of people in general getting more comfortable with these transparent marketplaces where the data is available, that is the next step. Like, that is the big growing pain. And when that becomes, it doesn't have to be everything. I think there will always be a place for private sales. I'm not quickly auctioning everything I want to sell. Like, that's not the only way I'm interacting in the hobby, but this does need to be the majority if we want to see these financial systems come into play. So that's the growing pain right now. And once that's done, if you have, everything is being handled in a way that is controlled through vault services or through aggregators with strict rules, and so business is being conducted uniformly, and you have transparent processes that allow for you to collect data over time, I think that it will be a very short leap before people are like, okay, there's leverage opportunity here. Here we can introduce credit, but you can't base credit with that data. And so I think that's where we're at.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially with and I don't know if it's maybe confidence in the market, because you do make a good point when it comes to like the sports side of things. From what I've at least been able to observe from the outside, they'll throw it an auction. I mean, because they know it's going to go for a price that they're comfortable with and they're confident in. One thing I have noticed, at least with where Pokemon is today, and I'm curious, Rusty, even on yourself, since you do a lot of eBay auctions, things like that. There's been some outliers, sure, especially with just the, things like snap cards, trophies, things like that. Taking all those aside, I don't see near as much volatility when it comes to kind of your mid-tier cards or your, I don't want to say upper echelon, but I guess the let's call it the 95% of what the actual market is, the $50 price point card, whatever that is. I haven't seen as much volatility with that. Are you seeing kind of a similar trends, with maybe your auctions or just kind of what you've seen in the market?
I've seen it all over the place. I feel like some items are going for way less than what you would think that they'd go for. And then there's other items that I think are low. And then I go to check the price, and it's like that auction just went for as high as it would have in a buy now. So I think it's still up and down for me. It's not as volatile as it was, that's for sure. It's still like kind of trending downwards, in my opinion. Like, I saw a little tick up, and then it's like it come back down again. I don't know. I mean, you have to imagine a lot of this could be completely affected by these waves that PSA is sending back. I mean, because I haven't gotten back a PSA graded card now in maybe 2 months, something like that. But 2 months ago when I had like 10,000 of them come back at once. So I can imagine that if everybody else is experiencing the same kind of, waves, it might be where they jump down really quick. And then as people start running out of that inventory again, it kind of pumps back up. I mean, I don't know what all's playing, into the market itself, but in my opinion, it should start trending back up again. Before COVID, typically the summer was a really slow time of year. People just weren't on as much, and it would kind of tick all the way up until around Black Friday, and then it would stay high. It would definitely start coming down, but it would stay high until through tax time, and then it would really slow down. Between like that April and July, early September type time rate. So I'm curious to see if it's going to go back to that type of thing, or if we're just going to continue, pulling back because of how high we were for the past couple of years. Now, I have noticed, there are some cards that, that are defying logic. Like right around the peak, I bought a Japanese base set Charizard and PSA 10 for like $2,500 for an auction house. And then I just saw an auction. I don't know if it was paid for, but it was like $7,000 or something through PWCC. And of course, you've got different things that can play into factors there, but even still, like the previous sales were still in like the $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 range. So like that one right there has come up quite a bit, whereas the regular base set Charizard has continued to trend down.
Yeah, I have noticed Japanese specifically getting a lot more love. Let's say recently, a lot more people getting interested in Japanese, and I would say one of the more stable cards I've seen, at least over time. Which shout out to Trade Natural. Anybody who doesn't follow him on Instagram, probably the greatest. Like the amount of effort he puts into his posts on the auction ends and things like that is so great. But the meme at this point is kind of Crystal Charizard. That's one that has consistently. Talk about data points. I think that is sold probably
every week,
at least every week. At least for the last few months. It's just crazy. And I think he even posts now. He just has another one. But that's one of the ones that from a confidence standpoint, a stabilization standpoint, it tends to stay, at least for a card of that value, about as close as it can to a stable trajectory, of selling for a certain price. It's one of those things that I haven't seen at least another card that's been that stable. Granted, everything kind of dropped down, for a while after the boom, but that one seems to have kind of regulated itself a little bit. And I agree with, Charlie's take that if we can get to a more confidence level to where everybody can auction and be comfortable that, there won't be a 70% drop, sure, some outliers, but it can actually go for a median price that people can traject with. I think that would definitely help out. Like you said, businesses as your own, Charlie, and being able to kind of make those moves that other people can do with financial institutions. So, that was one of the main pieces I heard in that podcast, that interview that you did with him, that I really, really intrigued me and piqued my interest, because I don't hear a lot of people talk about the business side of Pokemon as much, outside of buying cards from distributor and making profits. But that was a really interesting thing. So I hope it happens for you. I'm sure you do as well. So I know you said you've tried a couple of times, and that would definitely help you guys. So what I've got, guys, is I've got one question left for each of you, and then one question for both you guys to answer. So let me take a look here. So Rusty, we'll start with yours, then we'll do Charlie's, then we'll do both, and then we'll get to chat questions. So chat, I appreciate everybody watching. I see we've had a pretty active chat, a consistent one. If you guys have any questions for either one of these guys, just at PeekDatChu, and I'll farm through those after we go through these. So Rusty, one of the things I wanted to ask, as someone who, like I said, you're at, I think, 415,000 eBay solds at this point. Even subtracting consignments, what you've been able to build and what you've been able to push as far as volume is just, it's just amazing. Even as recent as your special delivery Charizard buys, you said, hey, I bought a couple and proceeds to cover the table with them, which I loved. So I'm curious with, buying and selling as much as you have, and especially making volume purchases of products. I guess I want to talk about the fundamentals that you really have kind of looked for whenever you go out and buy these. Are there specific patterns that you look for that are sort of tried and true tested that you've seen over the course of doing this for so many years that you say, okay, it matches this, I see a pattern that this is a good buy? Or is it something that, depending on what comes out, you have kind of your own way you look at the market and you go, well, let me kind of look through and see, I guess, is there a format to the winning volume buys that you've been able to do that you look for?
I wish there was, but honestly, a lot of it's just, if I see it and I just get that feeling like, hey, I got to have this right now, I probably just go ahead and buy it until I don't feel like buying it anymore. It's kind of like the special delivery Pikachu, or the special delivery Charizard. I just went ahead and bought those. I imagine the price is going to come down below what I paid. I paid it right at $50 a piece, but I could get 200 at once. I could just be done with it. I went ahead and bought them, and I sent 20 off to be graded, and I sent 180 back. I tried doing buy the individual thing with the special delivery Pikachu, and so far, I got burned on those. So don't think that all of my deals are good. I mean, because I was buying those even at the high of $300 a piece, but I was just kind of slowly chugging along, buying them here and there. And, I still have all of those special delivery Pikachus, because even in like a 9, it's like 140, 150 bucks or something like that. So, I mean, for something like that, I didn't do very well. But like the special delivery Charizard, if I can get those for a third of the price sealed, I'll actually like that one better than the Pikachu anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and just buy all of those, in a nice giant lot. But a lot of this stuff is, whenever I see a new release come out, I have distributor access. So that's already a one-up that I have on most of the market. Like the Charizard Ultra Premium collections that will be coming out, I'm going to have plenty of those that I get from my distributor, and I'm going to be getting them for much lower than anybody else. On a product like that, I really like it. I like the artworks and all those Charizards, not just one of them, but all of them. So I'm going to just send them back. I mean, if I get that feeling about a product and I think it's really good and I can order more, then I'll just go ahead and order more. Like Lost Origins right now, I'm really enjoying opening up this set, even though it doesn't have but the one Charizard, which is Leon's Charizard, in it. But I really like it, and it's super cheap. So to me, something like that seems like a much better deal to buy than going back to like an Astral Radiance, where I didn't like those boxes as much, and they are readily available. But I think those boxes are going for even more than Lost Origins right now, or Lost Origin. It's not Lost Origins. I keep throwing an S on the end of that for some reason.
I've said the same thing. So.
For the most part, it's just a gut feeling for me how I like it, and that may be molded by the years of experience I've had in the hobby, just from the sales. And I might react a little different to something that I've seen sell, 1,000 times, like an Ancient Mew versus a card that I can't sell any of because I graded, 200 Espeons from Battle Academy. That's a non-holographic rare in PSA 9. Of course, I won't be doing that again. So I've made mistakes along the way too. And, those, when your wallet gets hit and it hurts, you learn from that as well.
Well, I do enjoy, you've always heard, at least in the collector community in the space, is, buy what you like or buy the card, not the grade, all the fun little adages that they say. But, it truly sounds like, especially like you said, combined with your experience and then also just actually looking at what's out there, you buy what you like. I mean, like you said, I think I saw you post about or maybe you talked about it, the special delivery Charizard. It's got Charizard and Pikachu on it. What's the not like, and there are kind of those, coming at it, I guess, from a view of not necessarily strictly just the logistical business side of it is, okay, there's this price point, there's this. You actually putting in kind of a little bit more of, a collector's thought into it. What would I buy? What do I really like about this? I think is a testament to, why you've been so successful and why, you've made probably many, many, many great volume purchases and been able to make money off of that because you buy from a true collector's perspective, which I think is it's rare, for companies to be able to do that, but you as an individual being able to do it with your business is it's admirable. So that's one thing that I was really curious about. Is it a formula? Is it patterns? Or like you said, it's just I like this stuff. I think it's got fundamentals based on past purchases I've done, and it seems to do well for you. That's awesome. Charlie, last question for you. So you've mentioned in the past the Black Star promo, the 2000 Lucky Stadium, is your favorite card. I don't know if that's been updated or changed on your end, but I feel like once people pick their favorite card, they kind of stick with it. One of the things that you've mentioned is you don't have everything that you want when it comes to collecting and your personal collection. What are 3 cards that you have not been able to acquire that you want for your PC?
I could just pull my list up. This is sweet. Yeah. See, Rusty's got him. He's got him on deck. I haven't been able to finish my Coro lottery promo set. It's kind of like the big one that I'm working on right now. I have 5 out of the 8. I still need 3 more of them. It's one of those things where not a lot of people know about it, and there weren't a lot of them, so it's like a difficult thing because people don't even know to pull them out. So you pretty much just have to get lucky if they're listed at all. Or there's a couple other people that honestly I'm not the most talented when it comes to hawking Japanese websites. There are people who just they dedicate hours a day to doing that. I don't have the ability to put that time and put into it, and so I have not been able to become as skilled as some of the other people. So a lot of times it's also just I publicize what I want, and I hope that they either want a flip opportunity where they can make some quick money off of what I need, and that's my way of kind of paying for that time that I can't put into it. or that they'll finish their collection and then have extras, and there's a deal to be made there. So that's kind of like the first thing that I'm going for. I think I've said that like my next big one that I would like an Ishihara GX. I was very, very wrong. I thought that more of those were going to pop up than they did. I'm still confident in the numbers being produced exceeding one sheet. I think that there's almost certainly 2 sheets worth. So there's a lot more that could come up. The number that we've seen is really low. So that's been, and then also it got like a lot of hype right at the peak. And so like, I think people are like kind of attached to this like mega hype price that I don't think would be realistic right now. And so, you know, I think that also can hurt the number of copies that are available because people don't want to be on the downtrend. They want the old prices, and especially with big cards like that where you have nothing in it, it's really easy for people to say, I'll just wait. You know, maybe I'll get that price later, you know? So yeah, that's kind of like this, probably the second one that I'm going for. I don't really have a third one right now. I mean, those are kind of like my main goals. Like I picked up some really expensive and really nice stuff in the last year or two. And I have like just other things going on. You know, I have a kid.
Just a few. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like I've just been kind of like enjoying life and kind of like, you know, there's been so much change that I don't feel like I have my footing yet. I'm kind of, you know, suspending my assessments of the market. So like I recognize it's like, oh, things peaked and they're coming down, but I still I see so many different arrows going in different directions, a different place in the hobby that it's really difficult to kind of wrap my head around it. You know, I think that, you know, in terms of like what I'm buying into, like how does that impact my collecting? You know, when I do get into this place where I am feeling just like broadly cautious, I just kind of like want to sit and look. I tend to slow down or at least consolidate my goals. So I have like a fairly consolidated like list of goals, and I also, you know, cool stuff still happens. So like I also want to just be there for like the new stuff that happens. The cool, you know, like we could have another illustration contest, like, and that would be sweet, you know. And it took me a really long time. Yeah, it took me a long time to finish my like English Art Academy set. You know, I would definitely want to be involved there. I would want to be cash ready. I would want to be like prepared. You know, when the 25th anniversary corporate history deck came out, that was something where I was like, yep, I have to have this. Like, this is extremely cool. And so, you know, I was fortunate to be able, because I was cash ready, because I was ready for a moment like that, I was able to get a partial deck from like one person, and then immediately turn around and be able to get a full deck as well. And so, you know, that was cool. That put me in like a great place. I'm really happy with like what happened with that. And, you know, we haven't seen a lot of them, and, you know, they're already over 6 figures. So
they're like a ton. Yeah, you were one of the first people I saw post the creature deck and the Chansey and all of that. And, you know, from me personally, I just love the box. I thought the display box was amazing that everything came in. But
I love the box. Oh, yeah, the box is insane. And even like the hand-dyed like indigo zipper bag inside with the energy symbols on it. Like, there's just so much cool stuff about it. Like, it's just, I don't know. And also, it was basically made for me in terms of like the intersection of like history and Pokemon cards and like a non-standard release, and it's promotional, but also kind of like a corporate gift. And like, it's just like, it doesn't fit any real good categories. It kind of like is half in all of them, which is how I feel as a person. So that's, you know, it's like a really great, it was a great release, and I love it, and I'm really excited about it. So yeah, you know, like I just picked that up. And so like, I don't know what the next thing, like, so the third would probably just be something that hasn't come out yet, you know? Like, I think that there's going to be cool stuff that's released, and, you know, I'm enjoying sort of like these different promotions that like come out and kind of picking stuff up. And I still think, I mean, I'm still like, I feel like Eevee Heroes just came out, and, you know, like I'm focused on kind of like these modern things and like what's happening. And, you know, I'm really enjoying like Japanese character rares. English ones, not so much. I'm not like the person, I primarily collect English. I'm not that person that says like aesthetically the yellow border ruins everything, but I do think the character rares specifically, like I do really like the Japanese prints of those. I think they look great. So, you know, I'm still like picking up a bunch of those, you know, like a lot of those, like tens of thousands of those, because I just think they're awesome and they're way too cheap. And yeah, it's just been like, you know, just like focusing on stuff like that. And sometimes it kind of like blurs the line where it's like I find myself like I do like, as a business, I think they're a great idea, but I also really like them, which makes it even easier to go in, you know, instead of getting 5 copies, maybe I got 1,000 copies of like, of one that I think is like really good. And, I think that's kind of like where my spending's at right now.
No, it's awesome. It's the left and right brain actually working together, which is always a plus, I think, for most of us. So, well, cool. Well, we're going to get to chat questions here. I've got one last question for you guys. And then, chat, everyone watching, I think I saw a few different questions come through. I'll just start kind of from the top and do that. So they might be related to topics we talked about in the beginning, but I want to make sure that people get their time in. And, we're making, decent time right now. So last question for both of you. If there was another passion that you both had to build another business around, I guess business and or life, other than Pokemon, what would that be if you guys had to think of one? And Charlie, you can't say wooden mallards because that would just be cheating. So I know you're a crazy collector of those.
That's true.
Any other passion that you guys would see yourself like? I would take my life with this if I didn't do Pokemon.
I would probably do something with like construction or building, maybe even working outside, because I really enjoy that. I like seeing progress in what I'm doing. I love being outside, and a lot of times Pokemon does take me away from that. Like that's one hindrance that it does have, but I really enjoy seeing things, kind of coming together. And like right now, we're remodeling the house while we're living in it, and it's definitely frustrating at times, especially having to do it during the little bit of family time we have, or we might lose a little bit of sleep and then having to get the materials and stuff. But, if I had that as a full-time gig, maybe I would enjoy it a little bit more.
Okay. Charlie?
I don't know. I think I don't know. I struggle with this all the time. I always think like, man, if I wanted to transition to another career, what would I do? And I sincerely don't know. I like business to an extent. I like the intuitive decision making process. I like the research and designing products, and I enjoy that aspect of things. So I think there's a decent chance that I would just do business consulting. That would be like a likely outcome. I don't so much enjoy accounting, spreadsheets, stuff like that. I hired that out. I don't really enjoy that. But yeah, I think like business, I'd probably be doing business, and specifically, I could also see myself business ethics. I have a philosophy degree. I really enjoy sort of thinking meaningfully about how we structure businesses and stuff like that. So I could see myself sort of in the business ethics side as well. Those are probably two areas that I think that I could potentially go into. If I had to build a business with and I've wanted it to be profitable and not just work for a different business, but I was building the actual business, probably real estate. Honestly, it's has a lot of tangential stuff where no two houses are the same, but there's still trends, and it has a lot of different leverage game to it where you're picking properties and you want them to grow, but at the same time you're looking at okay, if I turn this over, what rate am I getting on it? But you have sort of the element of you can keep a house but still have free cash flow on it, which is unique because that's something you can't do in cards. There's no way for me nobody's renting my cards, right? It's not an option. So yeah, I think I would probably enjoy that aspect as well.
Well, when you guys start your real estate company, think of a good name for Rusty builds them, Charlie's acquiring. So yeah, good pairing. Well, that is all the questions I had for you guys from myself. Like I said, I do want to get to a few different chat questions. So I want to start off with, first off, David Asplin said, TCA Gaming, you have those Pokemon movie WB film posters, right? How much did you pay for them? I'm trying to make an offer for Pokemon the movie, Power of One, but no idea on how much to offer.
So, actually, I think I sent a guy sent some to me in an email recently, and I did not end up buying them. I sent them to Cool Trainer Ryan. I think he may have bought them, but I'm not completely sure. So I'm not up to date right now with the actual prices on those. I'm assuming you're talking about the regular posters that basically anybody could have. You're talking about I've got a WB Uncut sheet that I bought, and then I've got that WB Warner Brothers CD thing with Mewtwo on the background that I think one guy went around and sold to every YouTuber for $1,000 somehow.
That's good to hear. So I'm just going through here. I think there was one here at the bottom. SpookyKid said, saw the black triangle base box from Rusty yesterday. How rare are those boxes? Any clues on the outside of the box that could indicate that?
So that's the second, or I think it's the third one that I've opened up myself. And, you would think that they would be pretty rare, but I don't know. Like, we've seen so many of them in the past, few years. There's a guy on Instagram, Met7Games. He actually had a case of them. And he,
Oh, wow.
by the way that the logos were on there, he was able to tell from the ones that were in his individual case that all of them should be the same and have black triangles on the inside on the packs. But I'm not really sure that there's any type of universal thing. If there was, that would be awesome. I'd love to have a variant box and we'd be able to concrete that. But I mean, who's going to be able to test that and to make sure? It's a lot easier to disprove something with one bad example than to prove something without having the entire sample itself. But for me, what I can say is every box has just looked like the normal generic blue wing Charizard. I've never seen one come out of a green wing Charizard box. Never seen one come out of a box that has only one location on the bottom. Usually, if it's regular USA and has one location, those are 1999, 2000. It's like a different 1999, 2000 variation without the dates on the side. So I think if it looks like a regular base set box, the most generic, cheapest type you could get, then it might have a chance at having black triangles on the pack.
Awesome. Shout out Dan, Catch 'em All Collectibles. Quaxley will bring us to the promised land. He is he's a huge Quaxley fan. So I think that was related to our Bidoof conversation.
Bidoof.
Yeah, I would definitely prefer Quaxley over Bidoof, Dan. Just a personal preference. Let me see if there's anything here at the bottom, guys. Pokemon Cave says, you guys think you'll put it on another event like Hartford?
I don't know. It's I mean, almost certainly not like Hartford. It would be entirely different. I would never work with a Pokemon company again for producing an event. I would exclusively do that outside the confines of an individual company, but at the same time that becomes difficult. I feel like with like Legends, the problem we ran into is, we're working with various Japanese like IPs, and that's just so hard because they all feel differently and they all have different expectations. And with COVID, it became really difficult. Like the example I would give is that the U.S. offices for Konami, to my understanding, are still not completely operational from COVID shutdown. So like that's you're talking about like that perspective. There's still not total free travel into and out of Japan. Like those challenges become really hard. One of the things that's really tough with the TCG space is that the biggest markets are all in the United States and the producers are almost all in Japan, and that is just not a great combination. The best way to do it is to kind of avoid the IPs entirely, which is where you get something like Collecticon, where they entirely focus on sort of like pop culture. Like I would say that like Collecticon, having gone to Collecticon, like you can see the remnants of having started with TCGs, but it's almost a pop culture con. Like it has limited to do like with really TCGs. Like obviously Vanilla Ice is in no way related to TCGs. And that's like their headliner, right?
That man runs the circuit. Yeah. I've heard his music needs to be turned up at Collecticon. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat, but I hear it's pretty low. Yeah,
I've been, and it's a really great thing. It's a really great idea, but it's again, it's like how to have these TCG based events been able to succeed, and almost exclusively the answer is by getting away from being TCGs. They blend into pop culture. They do a San Diego Comic-Con thing, or and importantly too, like Comic-Cons like being based around like the comic world. Those IPs are American. They're American IPs, and that's why they've had so much freedom and been able to do so many things that we think are cool. I think that like the event thing would be difficult. Like I would still like to see something, but I'd probably shoot smaller, not bigger, and see organic growth. I think that you could still have something in the vein of the national that like long term like could be successful. But then the question becomes like, is the best way to grow an event for collectors of the Pokemon TCG to do an exclusive event, or is it to try and build onto a pop culture con or build onto the sports card world? Or I don't know. Like I think those are really tough challenges, and it kind of comes down to like who wants to do it. But the other challenge is that events in particular, like in the last few years, have gotten a lot more expensive to run, and they were already crazy expensive. Event space is way up as they try to reclaim some of the losses from the COVID era, and simultaneously have increasing costs. So that's like tough. That's like really tough. It's like it's difficult, and I think that a lot of people don't really understand like basically how much financial risk you have to expose yourself to run something of that size. I would say like even the small collecticon, they're almost certainly exposing themselves to well over $100,000 between contractual guarantees from signers, performers, the physical space, stuff like that. And the TCG world is can be flaky. Like honestly, like it's you'll have like a lot of people that'll say they're interested in something, but when it comes to physically showing up, it can be difficult to like pull those numbers. So yeah, I don't think that we found sort of like the perfect answer in terms of like how I would will we put on another event like Hartford? It won't be like Hartford. Will we put on another event? I'm down to take another crack at it, but I want to be thoroughly post-COVID.
That makes sense. That's awesome. So your average player, question for both of you guys. Do you guys wish you sold more of your inventory in 2020?
For parts of it, yeah, I wish I would have sold in 2020. But I mean, at the time, I mean, who's to say that it wasn't going to keep going up when it did? But I sold a lot of stuff during the peak. I bought a lot during the peak as well. I was just having fun with it. So, hindsight's 2020. If I could go back, I'm sure I could find ways to make a little bit more money. But you know what? That might have prevented me from meeting some of these other goals along the way, since 2020.
Yeah, I think that when you operate, you have a guiding logic, and you may tweak that guiding logic over time. But anytime you talk about going back in time and radically altering it, the thing that would have led me to make that decision is either perfect hindsight, which doesn't exist, or like I can't take information from the future to determine that decision, or I'd have to completely change my underlying logic, and I don't wish to change that. I think that I've done pretty well. I'm confident in the logic that I have formed. And so like it led me to make the decisions that I made then. I made money then. I also lost money then. Like I've had really, really, really good buys where I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I've also had a few buys where like I have hundreds of thousands of dollars locked up. I can't get back out of it. Like there's like a lot of different decisions that go in that direction. And one of the things that like is kind of like advice that I use all the time is there's like an old coin and paper money dealer. He told me if you're not losing money sometimes, that you're not buying and selling enough. Basically, he said like if you're only making money, then you're operating way too cautiously. It means that you're like not exposing yourself to enough risk, which is really opportunity, and that you don't have enough confidence in your own ability to identify upside. And so yeah, that's like in terms of like what would I change about 2020? Like in terms of like buying and selling, I don't think that I would change anything that I've done, just because it ties into something much more important, which is how I operate.
I like it. John Doe said, do you think PSA will always take the share of grading, or will CGC continue to gain popularity? Even if I chime in, I think they're going to continue to gain popularity. I don't see why not. We're in a very competitive space right now that we haven't, or at least I never saw before. It was, for the most part, PSA or bust. And I see more and more people diversifying who they grade with. And I think that's a healthy thing for the hobby. I think that one company being the only people that you want to grade with, you're kind of at their terms of timeline, pricing, et cetera, is not really good for any market, because competition kind of breeds ingenuity. So my response, at least to John's question, would be gain popularity. I mean, it can only, it's not that it can only go up, but from the way I see it, it can only go up in the market as it is today. Any comments from either one of you guys on that?
I think it might have to do with how versatile each company is. Like I think CGC gained a lot of traction because of the time that we were in, but they've continued to show that they're willing to work with collectors a bit more so than PSA. And I think in a way they've made PSA start to work with collectors more. We started seeing them recognizing errors again, putting variations in, actually reaching out to creators and talking to people. I think PSA definitely still has, the majority share. They're probably going to for a long time. And unless we see something, majorly shift, it might be that way forever. But I think CGC has the opportunity to continue to grow in popularity with Pokemon collectors. But it's gonna really be up to them. How involved are they going to be? Are they going to be willing to shift, as the community is shifting and wanting different things, and are they going to be willing to work with everyone as well?
Yeah, so I think like the biggest thing that's going to help or hurt either company is the thing that either company does. I mean, I think that if things just went the way that they are, I think that you have to actively affect change. I don't think that simply being around a long time is enough. Like I think that when we look at like grading in the sports world, there are companies that are smaller than CGC already that have been around for a super long time. Be that because they don't want to grow. Like at BGS for a long time, they weren't seeking to like increase it, and they were one of the first people to shut down and just say like, we're not going to increase our capacity. Like we're just going to shut down grading if we get full. Or you just get like companies like SGC, which have just had like a really uphill battle. They're up against like several competitors, and they've earned some notoriety in their own right. But they still have they're still small. They're still really, really small, like much smaller than CGC Trading Cards is already. And so, yeah, I think, in terms of like, will they take like the majority share of grading? Yeah, because they have a 2 multi-decade head start. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that changes overnight. I think it's a war of attrition. But I also think too that like either company has the ability to help or hurt their position right now. I think that pricing is going to be a big factor. If PSA brands itself exclusively as this like $30 and up club, and the best deal that they ever offer is $18 a card for grading, I think they're going to lose a lot of market share long term, because I think CGC will play ball and will go lower and will have lower prices. And over time, that does make a difference. People in Pokemon, it's almost like the majority of our cards are worth very little. And so it just doesn't make sense for us to be grading like super cheap cards at $30. There's just no way to do it. At the same time, what's interesting about Pokemon is that, people who collect high end also tend to have a lot of these smaller cards that they like and they put in their collection and continue to acquire. And people want to grade their whole collections. Like they don't want to just grade the high end. Like the firsthand experience I have says that people want their whole collections graded. And, I think that is an environment that the companies have to consider. They have to adapt to. They have to find a way to be able to satisfy these cheaper cards through a bulk service that's affordable, at the same time that they're, making their money on these like bigger cards. So, I also think too, like marketing could play a huge role. I mean, if PSA decided to just stop spending on marketing, that could be a factor. And now, you have recent acquisition of both CGC and PSA. So the parent companies, Collectors Universe and CCG, collectively have been purchased by separate private equity firms. That introduces a lot of uncertainty. Private equity is really good at some things and really bad at others. I've seen a lot of decisions made at both companies that I think are probably not good for them. And I've seen resources given to them that I think are great for them. And I don't know like what's going to win. I don't know like how that's going to impact the decisions they make on an individual basis. But I will say that like, one of the things Rusty said is like reaching out to creators. And I think being willing to play ball with the community is huge. I think that, I see CGC at a lot of events. I don't see PSA at a lot of events. Is that going to have an impact long term? It sure can. I don't know that it will. I don't think anybody can see that. But, how aggressively you're putting money back into the industry and into the hobby, like absolutely has an impact. And I think you see that in all sectors. I don't think it just has to be the grading sector. I think that you have lots of these service-based companies like auction houses, where, I think that like PWCC really, that's like one of the main ways that they grew was that they were in communication with hobby. They were in the hobby. And, then you have like sort of these like passive actors like Heritage, where, Heritage has been super involved in Texas-based events. And by virtue of that, they've also been at like some of the Collecticon and stuff. And they've got a good relationship going there. But that's new. I mean, that's like the first thing that they've really done in the TCG world. eBay is one where I think that eBay is just now starting to do a lot with community-based creators, especially ones that are tied into their platform like Rusty. But I think there's a lot of room where eBay could be putting money back into the hobby, investing in that, doing events, doing community-based stuff that would allow them to kind of hold tight this like hard like position that they have. And I think that not doing so does create opportunities for other companies to kind of like do it and snap up market share. I don't think anybody's immune. Advertising is a thing you have to always do, even when you're on top. And so, yeah, like I think that will be the big factor is sort of like, how do these companies behave? Like, how are they going forward in the hobby? Are they willing to make investments because they believe in the hobby? Or are they only willing to respond to sort of these like very specific data points that they're comfortable with, familiar with? Like I look at like Whatnot's growth has been just massive. I mean, they've truly changed the way that the hobby interacts. And they've really just like, I mean, like I have never seen any company enter our space and work harder for customers. They're at every event. They have invested heavily. They have always been the first to sign up to sponsor people. Like they put real dollars and real time and real resources into it. They do have a smart team that's behind that. But overall, I just think that like that approach has allowed them to take huge chunks of market share. I mean, there are absolutely millions and millions and millions of dollars that are not transacting on eBay because of Whatnot's willingness to play that game and to do that push. And I don't think that if eBay just launched the exact same product right now, that they would suddenly, the community would forget that. People have already built those communities out. I don't think PSA and CGC are exempt from those types of questions, from that type of equation. I think that if PSA is considered expensive and certainly more expensive than CGC long term, if the turnaround times are not attractive, if this expansion of capacity that they're talking about does not also come with better customer experiences, does not come with better treatment of market makers like dealers, does not come with, really like a serious intentional atonement for the way that the last few years have gone between the company and collectors. Like, I think that will translate to real loss of market share, 100%. At the same time, though, CGC has to do all the right things. They have just as much ability to lose market share. They have just as much ability to be overlooked and to get out of touch with collectors. And so, yeah, I think that it's a fight inside the companies because institutional memory is really hard to establish. It's difficult for these companies to understand how they're perceived on an individual basis, and even harder once they do assess it to remember it. They have turnover internally, new projects come up, deadlines come up, and everybody's just sort of like in this work grind. And so their ability to hone in and strategically approach these things, that is an expensive, difficult, and demanding process. So I'd love to see either of the companies pull that off, but I think both of them are still kind of setting their strategy, and we don't have like a tempo of participation in the hobby yet post-COVID. So it'll be interesting to see like what does the rhythm of participating in the hobby look like when things mellow out, when there's not these peaks and these valleys, when there's not constant events or nothing, like when it's not like I'm curious to see how the rhythm of participation in the hobby is set and how the companies respond to that.
It's very well said. The Whatnot was the first thing that came to mind as you were discussing that, is because of how involved they are. So yeah, I can completely agree with that. So what we'll do, guys, is we're coming up on time. We'll do 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up. If that works for you guys. So I did kind of laugh at this question, but I think it's a good one to ask from Basic Trainer. Is Moonbryon the gauge for the Pokemon market, and is it too big to fall?
Well, the Moonbryon, it is doing well. I don't think I hear so many people dog on how it's in a bubble, but you know what? It's got a lot of sales that keep pushing behind it. And I think that might speak volumes to the popularity of not only that card, but just Pokemon in general. For the people that are coming in, they really appreciate the artwork, and it does have a scarcity to the pool. But no, it could easily fail. I think we all realize this. It would just take one huge reprint from Pokemon where their pull rates have changed, and then that card, PSA opens all their floodgates up, and then a bunch of those come through. But as it stands now, it's doing really well. Like it's basically an outlier for modern Pokemon cards, and that's why so many people try to point to that card, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm not that tuned in, honestly, to sort of like that specific card, and what it's doing in modern kind of is outside of my radar. So my focus has been on EV Heroes, not the English equivalents. I like the scarcity of the Japanese sets. And, one thing that Rusty did touch on is that, there could be a huge wave of them. And that's what always scares me with the English stuff, is that there's so much out there that, there's a lot of possibilities for really what could what could come up with the market. And I see it long term too, kind of being a situation where I like a situation where eventually you just can't get the cards. Like that's really like when I find my strategies thriving. With English, it's not really the same game. You're kind of speculating. There is a high volume of sales, and that high volume of sales usually doesn't go away. Over time, you still have a lot of sales, and so you have to grow within that environment, which just makes it a different strategy to kind of approach. In terms of being too big to fail, it's definitely not too big to fail. I mean, this is a card that just came out. Like, this is a set that's still being printed. When we're like comfortably at the point where we say like, there's no way they're going to reprint this set, then we'll start making those types of assessments. But in general, no card is too big to fail. There's no, you're the only thing that you can really lean back on is like true scarcity, where you have a limited group of stakeholders, and those stakeholders have the ability to collectively, operate in a certain way. Like, then you can get cards that are quote unquote too big to fail because somebody will buy them all up. But it would not be possible for anybody to even own 1% of the Moonbyrons. It's not possible. It's actually impossible, right? And so, like, under those circumstances, I think that's what makes Pokemon so strong. Like, sort of the distributed nature, the kind of like diluted ownership. You don't have a Magic reserve list situation. You definitely always have like this huge number of people, and they're all interacting in their own ways, and that determines prices. I think that makes our prices a lot stronger, but at the same time, it does introduce a degree of volatility, and so nothing's too big to fail.
Yeah, good question, Basic Trainer. Moonbyryon is, as Rusty said, it's an outlier in modern Pokemon. It's probably one of the, it kind of defies logic for a lot of the things that I've seen with it. But so what I want to do, guys, we'll do one final question. I actually like this from David Asplund. He said, if you could have a signed card by anyone in the hobby, who would it be? Someone from Game Freak, artist, voice actor, a Pokemon. I don't know how you get a Pokemon to sign a card, but it's pretty funny. I know with autos being crazy right now, I'm curious if you guys have a certain auto that maybe you haven't acquired before that would be cool to have.
And I'm not big on voice actor SIGs for the most part. It would almost certainly be an artist. I think that the signatures by other people who are behind the games and stuff, and like the Ishihara SIGs that come out of Worlds every year, like I think they're interesting. I think they're cool. They have their own place. But they're certainly not like, I don't find them super compelling. Like, I'm not going out of my way for them. I'm not spending a bunch of money on them. So it'd be an illustrator, somebody that I don't currently have. I don't have like a certain, like, there's so few people that have signed at this point that there's no one that's like really crazy. There are people who are dead that I would love to have had their signature. So, maybe that's the answer, is somebody that I can't have. But, I would just say like any artists that, have done lots of art, or, have a unique style that are particularly cool, that I don't currently have, like, is somebody that I would be equally excited to put in my collection today.
Well, for me, I'm not huge on the signatures as it is, but I think the guy's name is Tajiri. He's one of the original guys that created Pokemon.
Satoshi Tajiri.
Yeah. Because I had one of those, and somebody told me that it might be counterfeit, or it might have been signed by an assistant or something. It was actually like I think it was a graded Tajiri or something, but it ended up going for so cheap, it probably wasn't, one that was authentic, because they said that he has some kind of like trembling issue, I think, with his hands when he goes to sign, and it didn't really have any of that in the signature itself. So to have one of those that's completely, like, you can verify that it's authentic, I think that would be kind of cool to have on an original base set card. I would like it on Bulbasaur if I could pick one.
Oh, that's awesome. My answer to that would be I love Amakuni. I think he's one of the funniest enigmas in this hobby specifically. So I have his 1997 glossy trainer card with his like bunny ears. He's doing that. I would love to have him sign that card for me. So pretty.
That could happen.
I would love for it to happen. He's still alive. So unlike
Yeah.
Charlie, mine is alive and he's going around. So I would love to have that. Maybe him even do like a small little, like, I would just love an outline of like the ears in a sketch or something. And I just think he's so funny. So that would be mine. Beyond that, guys, again, I just want to make sure I thank you both sincerely so much for doing this. This really concludes the finale of this season of episodes. So I couldn't have thought of, two people I would have had on beyond you two guys. So before we end, is there anything that you guys have upcoming that maybe you want to talk about? Any events we'll see you at? Anything you have going on? Rusty, we can start with you if you want.
We talked about signatures. Let's just say I probably overspent on a few signatures recently in which I was under the impression it was something other than what it was. So I might have a video coming out talking about how I'm such an idiot. But that's about it. I don't have anything too pressing coming on.
Okay. And I will have both your guys' links. I've got Black Card X as the website. Charlie, I've got your Instagram. Rusty, I've got everything from eBay to Patreon to your channel. So if anybody doesn't follow you guys, it's all in the description. But Dan said, LOL to your video, Rusty. So I'm sure we're all looking forward to that. He's a huge fan of autographs and believes in the authentication. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charlie.
I'll just be at Baltimore Regionals for the Koki Saito signing in 2 weekends. So that'll be exciting, and I'll see people there. And I've got a little after party I'm putting together too. So it's going to be a fun time, and I'll post something about that on Instagram. So I'm looking forward to just seeing a bunch of people. And I think this will be probably the biggest American signing ever. That's kind of my feeling. There's a lot of people coming. So I'm just excited to see that excitement that we're seeing in prices and stuff translate to who's willing to show up for an actual event and kind of partake there. So that'll be fun.
That's awesome. Well, guys, I do want to end today's stream just with a quote. I thought this was pretty fitting since this is our final episode of the season, and it's actually from Charlie, an interview he did with CGC back in 2020. And I think it not only encompasses what this series is about, but also just kind of what it means to be a collector in this hobby. So I thought that's how we would end this one, because it really stood out to me. So, quote, "I see collecting as a fundamental human task. We use collecting as an expression of what we find beautiful and important. We curate the world around us to make it more pleasant for ourselves, and we share the art, communities, excitement, gains, losses, and insatiable drive freely with the others who are like-minded. What it means to be human is a question any number of people could spend 1,000 lifetimes trying to answer. But I know through my involvements in the hobby that whatever it means, these feelings, moments, and experiences carve nature at its joints." So I really like that a lot. You are probably one of the most well-spoken people I've heard. So that just really stood out to me. So beyond that, I mean, well, you said
you can read that. You can read that at my funeral. You can read that at my funeral. Right.
Here's Charlie. He's carving hard. You mentioned a philosophy degree, and it just makes so much sense. I'm like, you speak so eloquently, and you're so good and concise on your thoughts. So as I was reading some stuff, I read that, and then I went back and read it, and then I went back and read it again, and I was like, I'm going to read this to everybody. So I haven't done it yet. I will link that in the description, that interview, because I really did enjoy every answer you gave to those questions. So beyond that, guys, again, thank you so much. This concludes the season finale of season 1. I will be back with a season 2. I will not really commit to a timeline. If I had to speculate, 5, 6, 7 weeks, something like that, just going to get some stuff booked and make sure I've got a good lineup of streams. I didn't want to hit you guys with one a month or anything. I just wanted to kind of line those up before we actually, went head on into this. So thank you, chat, so much for being so active. Thank you guys for joining us. Charlie, Rusty, thank you both so much for being a part of this. And I look forward to, hopefully seeing you guys in the future. I'll always plug Denver Collecticon. That's where everybody will see me. I hope to see you both there. I know you won't commit, but just it'll be there if you guys do want to show up. So thank you guys again. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
See you.